welcome to a very special episode of Two Cousins, One Chat. And yes, we are either side of Neil. Hi, I'm Kristy.
And I'm Ben, and thanks so much for joining us today as we chat all things sport and wrap up the FIFA Women's World Cup and those amazing Matildas.
Well, how are you, Ben? Because I'm still coming down from the highs of the FIFA Women's World Cup. It's been a pretty emotional ride, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I got to say, it's the first full soccer game I ever watched. Was that first?
Oh, really?
The penalty shootout game is the first soccer game I've ever watched in my life, and I tell you what, it was very, very stressful, but
it was
so amazing. And we got to say congratulations to Spain as well on being world champs. They did beat England 1-0. Sorry to all of our English friends out there, including one of our guests that's going to be coming up very soon.
It's going to be a bit awkward. It was incredibly stressful, Ben, and I think I've got way more grey hair than I started with a month ago. So
yeah, I didn't want to say anything, but yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
No, it was absolutely incredible, and we're going to be talking a lot about it with two of our two very special guests. That this episode has been a while in the making, and we're really excited to be chatting sport, in particular women's sport. So today we have, as I said, two very special guests who are legitimate, experienced, expertly qualified in all things sport, especially women in sport.
In saying that, I'm also now an armchair expert and fully qualified to bang on about women's football.
Of course, we all are. We're all screaming at the telly and not knowing the rules. It doesn't stop you actually screaming at the referee, so does it?
It's so good. But today we have the delightful Olivia Bramley and the wonderful Paul Bowell joining us. You might remember we had Paul on the show earlier this year, and if you didn't catch that episode, I highly recommend you have a listen. Paul is a PhD candidate who has submitted and soon to be a doctor, really soon, within the Sports Innovation Research Group at Swinburne University. And you remember his research is focused on understanding the effective experiences that digital self-tracking practices have on women, Australian rural footballers.
It just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Yeah.
Oh my God, I have to put my teeth back in again. But yeah.
And we also welcome...
That self-tracking stuff.
That's it, yeah. No, we would ask Paul about that today as well. And we also welcome Olivia Bramley to the show for the first time. Olivia is a PhD student in environmental sustainability or sport ecology and also part of the Sport Innovation Research Group at Swinburne. So we're all friends today. She holds a bachelor's in sports and exercise science from Nottingham Trent University, and her PhD investigates sports organisations' role in planetary boundaries and climate action. She's a research fellow at Deakin University and also tutors sports coaching, researching social impact through sports, and is a professional soccer player for West Adelaide Soccer Club this side of Neil. It's so good to have someone else on the show from Adelaide. Oh, so impressive. Welcome, Olivia, and welcome, Paul, to the show. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Yeah. Just before we start, can we just acknowledge that what has been the most amazing World Cup ever? And wanted to ask, who is the next nation to host and how can they top what we have just witnessed?
Well, there isn't actually a nation that has been chosen yet, so that's still in the works. So FIFA probably about 2.5, 3 years out generally, they nominate. There's been talk of having it in Africa, maybe South Africa, but it hasn't been announced yet.
Brazil,
right?
Mexico,
Well, there you go.
As well, yeah. Maybe the US with Canada. There's a few up there.
Wow. But they will have a hard time topping what's been a pretty amazing event. You got to say. I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to dive into that a bit deeper into the pod. But first of all, Olivia, commiserations to you, my dear. Overall, how did you enjoy the World Cup? And did you get to any games? And how did you watch the World Cup? I've got so many questions. I have to read through them. So.
Sure. I got to a few games. So I actually was in the UK when it kicked off, unfortunately. I was back for a nice wedding. And then flew back and I got a game in Adelaide. So I watched the French-Morocco game. And then obviously as England progressed, I've always gambled on the final. But when they came to the semis, flew to Sydney for that. So watched those, the semi and the final in Sydney live and at the stadium, and then the Matildas games, a couple at home and then one in a local pub when they played Sweden, which, like you said in the intro, was very intense and super exciting. Like, what a penalty shootout! Like I've played and been involved with soccer for years and years and years, and I've never ever watched a game like that. Like that was, and I'm not great. Like I watch the films and I have to Google the ending. Like I'm constantly like any series, films, and like, okay, what happens in the end? I need to know before I watch it. That penalty shootout, I just could not. It was so intense. But what a phenomenal tournament! Like every single game, the talent across like all the teams. So like how well did Nigeria do? Jamaica, like these teams just absolutely shows the growth of women's football. And then obviously my team, the Lionesses. Again, big statement from them. Even the Matildas, just teams absolutely stepping up, and yeah, like you said, absolutely incredible in the tournament, and it was awesome to be a part of it here in Australia and across New Zealand.
Yeah. And what about you, Paul? How was it for you? You actually went to a couple of matches in Sydney as well, is that right?
No, I went to a couple of matches in Melbourne. So
Melbourne. I'm sorry.
I was in Sydney for the
finals,
the weekend of the finals, but just went to some fan sites. But no, I went to the Australian Canada match in at Amy Park, and that was as FIFA calls it, the Rectangle Stadium.
Yeah.
It's a naming rights thing, so Amy's not a FIFA sponsor, so that's why they call them that.
I did not know that. Thank you for the explanation, because I was hearing that and I didn't know.
They went before the games, like FIFA will go around and we'll cover up all of the naming sponsors and then bring in like McDonald's and Coke and things like that. So if McDonald's or Coke are out there and you want to sponsor, this is a great podcast to sponsor. But no, that particular game, that Australia-Canada game, that was, I think, by far the best sporting event I've ever been to.
Wow.
And I've been to F1's, Australian Open, AFL finals, but that first 10 minutes was so tense. And then the next 80 minutes after Hayley Raso scored that goal, that was just the best 80 minutes. It was just amazing. And when Hayley Raso scored that goal, like, it was just such euphoria. And then, of course, VAR sort of stopped it, but then there was euphoria again as it got awarded the goal, and then she fell into the center of the circle, and everyone came around her. It was absolutely amazing. And then, well, I thought I saw the craziest penalty shootout because we went and saw USA and Sweden, and that penalty that sort of hit the bar and then just crossed the line by less than an inch or something like that. And that was an incredible match. But yeah, then that whole wave of the knockout phase of just, against Denmark and France and then against the Lionesses, it was just amazing for the Matildas. And it was, being someone who works and researches in women's sport, it was just such a joy to see it all unfold.
Yeah, amazing.
Absolutely, yeah. It was just insane. I think everyone in Australia was screaming at the television. If you weren't at the time.
Olivia, the stats on how many people watched this World Cup were pretty crazy and broke so many records, really rewriting the history books when it comes to sporting events. Apparently the Australia versus England match was the most watched program since the beginning of the rating system, which is kind of crazy. And, you hear stories about in the UK and Spain, they moved church mass, they opened pubs early, they did all these things so that people could watch the match. It's really amazing. And can you tell us what the atmosphere was like speaking to your friends and family in the UK?
Yeah, I think across the world, like you said, it was just huge. So from all the way like I know in England at first they had issues with the broadcasting. Like there was all these riots, like, we might not be able to show it, and it was just like insane that was even happening. And then off the back of you see the growth of the tournament, like I said, the most watched. It wasn't just here in Australia that everyone was getting around it, everyone was watching. It was genuinely all the way back in England, and they had the same fan park. So there's a lot of different kind of venues they'll show as well in groups, and they were just absolutely packed, heaving. And yeah, like I said, some I know a lot of the leagues as well postponed their games and changed their time so you could watch in the mornings, and then the teams could play in the afternoons themselves. Right. So yeah, really everyone was supporting and getting behind it. So wherever you were, yeah, it was huge.
That's unreal. And I know we've seen a lot of this on the television, but there were so many large overflow off-site fan sites set up, which all went really, really well until it didn't in Melbourne, particularly on one of the last matches got called off at Fed Square because the match before there was over, I don't know, Paul, was it over 10,000 people were squeezed into Fed Square and people were letting off flares and pushing down barriers and,
that was for the semi final for the Matildas and the Lionesses.
Oh, it just went nuts, and it was really embarrassing because leading up to that, it's just been such a perfect tournament. But yeah, there were just crowds were bursting out of all sorts of venues, pubs, watching the game.
So they didn't have anything at Fed Square for those final games.
They went back to the rectangle.
Okay.
Venue because Fed Square. I think the women, the Matildas came out. Did they come out, Paul, and say we don't want it? We don't want our game shown in this environment. Is that right?
Yeah. So
wow.
It's an interesting topic. So myself and my colleague, Dr. Casey Simons, we actually wrote a conversation piece that got published early last week about the fan culture around the Women's World Cup and the fan culture around women's sport in general, not just the Women's World Cup, but I think that Olivia and everybody who's been would contest to this. It's very different to normal sort of traditional men's sport. So there's much more collegiality, fun. You can go to, like I went to a Matildas game and I didn't have an Australian scarf, but I wore my yellow Hawthorn scarf. But I don't think that if I was to go watch Hawthorn and I didn't have a Hawthorn scarf, I wouldn't wear a green and gold Australian scarf. It's just not what you do. But in women's sports, a little bit different. But what we saw as the popularity got more is some of these more traditional fans that are more familiar with men's sport came along. And as Kristy said, that women's sport won't tolerate that sort of behaviour as what happened in Fed Square. So it's a really interesting message that I think that sports organisations want to take out of it. There's a lot of talk about increasing funding and increasing the reach of women's sport. And I think that sports organisations need to recognise that that women's sport brings a different fan culture, a different setting which people enjoy, and that the essence of women's sport would be changed if that sort of more hyper masculine type fan culture, which we've seen in sports like AFL and men's football too.
Yeah, there is a very different vibe, isn't there? We could see from not going to any of those fan sites, you could see that on TV as well you could see that by watching it on TV. So yeah, absolutely, it was interesting. It's kind of embarrassing too, watching what happened at Fed Square. So I don't know if you heard about that, Ben.
I didn't, but it's really interesting to say that there's this big movement, everyone's getting into it. So now along come these people that go to these male-dominated sporting events where the behaviour is completely different and start to change the vibe. And I didn't see it from that angle, Paul, but that's really, really interesting. And for the players to actually come out and go, "Nah, we don't want this happening." I think is really, really cool. Yeah.
Think back to the pitch invasion. Where was that? Like 12 months ago in Melbourne, and like that, you just can't ever imagine that happening in a women's match. So yeah, it is really interesting, and I reckon that there's another topic there for sure. But Olivia, I wanted to ask you. Some of the Aussie players have now become household names, haven't they? So we all know it's not just Sam Kerr or the coach Tony Gustafsson, Ellie Carpenter, Hayley Razzo, but also some of the other players that were in, like the UK's Mary Earps and Jenny Hermoso getting that unwanted kiss. So we've got lots of new names that everybody now knows about and can tell, with confidence like me right now. But what impact do you think this exposure will have on these players and their career and lives?
Oh, I think huge. And I think especially, I think we saw a lot of this impacts in the UK with the Euros. Like I think the way the WSL has grown in England and that growth, that was already building. But I think as Australia and New Zealand being host nations, I think it's brought that exposure here and just really demonstrated how elite these athletes are and how talented they are and the Matildas themselves. And I think, like I said, it happened in England off the back of the Euros, absolute showcased the talent we had in the Lionesses. And then here being on, they came fourth. Like the Matildas came fourth, and they got to those stages. And like I said, there's so many more names. I mean, saying about Sam Kerr, the roar in the stadium when she scored in the semi-final was something I've never heard. I've never heard a stadium play like that. That was phenomenal.
Wow.
But then I just the other games when she was injured, and for me, like I'm so impressed with Caitlin Ford and Mary Fowler. Like these players that maybe didn't have as big names are just they've really stepped up, and they've shown it's not just one or two players. It's not just the girls playing here or playing there. It really is the growth has just been incredible, and I think I'm to be a part of it as well, and as a player to see that opportunity growing. It was a tournament,
but we've also
sorry,
I keep chopping out a little bit there. That's okay. It just dropped out a little bit there, Olivia. It also touches on like epic sports womenship. Do you know what I mean? Like we haven't seen some of the examples that we've seen on the pitch before in other. I don't know, I haven't, but not to this level, which has been something that like so heartwarming to see those types of, like people hugging each other and commiserating with each other because, they obviously play together in Europe. So they're just setting a really elite.
Yeah, even in like the A-League memberships already, I've seen a couple of things on social media. I think 2 of the clubs have broke records of their membership. So off the back of the World Cup, people go, actually, I want to watch women's soccer now. Like, this is entertaining. This is quality. People are really getting behind it. So I really hope we continue to see that. And it's not one of these things, that it starts well and then throughout the season might trickle off or there's less exposure and we go backwards. Because I think it's just going to get better. These athletes, the more they're invested in, they're going to get better. So it'd be, hopefully that momentum does continue, and everyone gets the opportunities.
I was playing soccer with my son in the hallway the other night.
Oh, really?
And he was blocking me. The game is that we have to try and get the ball past the other person through into his bedroom door, which is at the end of the hallway. And he was really, really good. And he goes, I'm just like Mackenzie Arnold. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Yeah.
Yes.
3 weeks ago, you said Mackenzie Arnold. I wouldn't have had any idea who that was.
I love her nickname. Isn't her nickname the Brick Wall? Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah.
I made the thing with the picture, show a picture of Mackenzie Arnold, and it was just literally a brick wall. So good.
I saw that. Yeah, it was really funny.
My sister sent me from England actually. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say similar sort of thing.
No, go, please.
My family's obviously kind of followed soccer because of me, but it's mainly been my dad. Whereas my mum was like cancelled her plans because she's like, England are playing. And then my sister sent me a little picture of my niece and her like little football kit. She never have thought about soccer before, but again, just wants a kit, wants to be involved. And I think they messaged me like, oh, she wants to be like Auntie Livy. And I was like, well, there's definitely better players above there. But just the whole, I think the talk around it is really trickled out. So it's awesome.
Yeah, it's really, really positive. So a question for you both, and perhaps Paul, will start with you. And we've already sort of touched on it. There's been a lot of talk about this being a moment and being a catalyst for some long overdue changes to women's sport, like equal pay and funding and improvements to facilities, even at the grassroots level. And now the Australian government has committed, I think, $200 million to women and women's sport. What's your take on this whole discussion, and where do you think that's going to go?
It is a great catalyst. It's a great springboard, but I just think that we need to. For me, there's heaps to do. Like there's heaps to do. So this has been a fantastic exclamation point, but there's still this funding, this 200 million. Like there's going to need more of that. But I think that for me, the biggest thing is that it can now show Australia, especially, what proper investment in women's sport can produce. And this notion, sometimes sports organisations will make a comment of that there isn't an appetite for women's sport, or it's only at the Olympic level. So organisations now like the AFL, the NRL, they can see that with proper investment, proper time, proper strategies, you can produce world-class sport at the highest level that everybody will want to watch. And I think that that's the lasting legacy that we need to sort of continue on, and we need to stand up to organisations like the AFL, who I don't think are doing a great job with the AFLW. They're not fully invested in it at the moment, to say, if you do fully invest in your competition, look where it can be. Because like the Matildas, like their last 3 games, they completely outrated any AFL grand final. So there's no reason now why the AFL shouldn't be saying, in time, we have aspirations to get as many people watching the AFLW grand final as the AFLM grand final. And that should be the sort of the baseline starting point now for organisations, which I think that's the lasting legacy from this tournament.
Yeah. And what about yourself, Olivia? What's your take on the discussion in government and elsewhere?
Absolutely agree with Paul, and I think you definitely need to invest before you can have certain expectations from what perhaps other sporting codes might perform. So you're expecting, and what as a female athlete you've expected to do for years, is play at a standard that is the best of the best, whilst also navigating all these other kind of, I don't know, dual careers or all these challenges we come across, is trying to get to be a professional athlete and be as elite as you possibly can, with all these other, life stresses, things going on in the background, being kicked off pitches because a men's team needs to play before you. The backstory of all of these, I'm a huge fan of Jill Scott, who, is really interesting, like those kind of age players where they're now at the elite stage of being at soccer players, but they've definitely experienced it before. They were PE teachers that are getting permission to leave work to play because there's not been the funding to be able to give them a professional career, but they're still expected to play at a standard that's going to, get millions of people watching. Well, credit to the players that have drove it to this far. But then, like Paul said, especially in other sporting codes that perhaps are behind, you need that investment. You give an opportunity to these athletes and they're going to perform. Like we've seen it, they're performing without those opportunities already. So imagine, continuing that investment and continuing to give these players opportunities. It's going to evolve and grow bigger and bigger. And I think perhaps because of that backstory, or I don't especially know as myself, like I'm so grateful and appreciative of those little things that change, and the funding that comes, and the facilities, the resources. Again, being able to train on a certain pitch, on the main pitch, or at a certain time, and not being the ones that are training at 8:30 because you have to wait for the men's to get off the pitch, and it's not because of them, it's 100% got to be equal, but you have to invest to get to that point.
Yeah.
And then once you get to that point, again, you'll start seeing the talent develop. Once the talent develops, you're going to get spectators because it's exciting, because it's interesting, it gets respectable, it gets credible, and then that obviously kind of the momentum continues. It's got to take that investment, and I don't think it just comes down to funding. It does come down to kind of the opportunities and everything else around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think backing up Liv's point is, if you look at this last World Cup, so this was the first World Cup where they actually went to 32 teams. And if you actually have a look at the past Women's World Cups, they have been a little bit one-sided. So the traditional teams of the USA, Sweden's, Norway, Japan, China have dominated. And I think in the back of FIFA's mind, they were a little bit concerned adding to 32 teams that was going to be the case. But the biggest success of this World Cup was that 4 teams from Africa got out of the group stage. Jamaica got out of the group stage. America didn't go far. China didn't get out of the group stage. These big nations didn't get out of there. So you can see, like, it has truly become a world game through that development. But this has been coming. Like, Canada and France, the last 2 World Cups before, have been huge as well. So, yeah, just backing up what Liv says, coming off the investment, look what you can do.
Yeah.
And this female sports has been so hamstrung. So, and seeing it as we've just seen is just absolutely testament to what can be done. Paul, do you know how the players have been tracked in the World Cup and what sort of stats we've gathered, and what the teams have been doing with that information? Have you seen anything around that? Because this is your passion area.
Yeah, no, not really. Like football's not a huge analytical sort of game from like a spectator point of view. So, when we watch AFL and you've got like all the Telstra tracker and the hotspots, football's not sort of presented in that way. I saw Katrina Gorry had the most kilometres ran by any midfielder, which wasn't surprising. But no, I haven't really seen too much about that. But it was actually, I was at a Women in Sports symposium last week in Sydney over that World Cup final week. And actually saw a really interesting presentation talking about how women's sports, things like analytics is really lacking in professional, like all professional leagues. They're not actually putting that investment in, which is an issue. And I think that's just, once again, is we're so focused on getting, participation, getting facilities and things like that. I think eventually that's sort of the investment in the analytics and the tracking. Because with the sport that I researched, AFLW, for example, like they use the analytics, but it's not publicly released like the AFLM players. So you can go on, I could go on the app now and tell you exactly how far a Melbourne players ran or a Sydney players ran from the game they're playing, but that doesn't get released for AFLW. Okay. So I think it's an emergent part of sport.
Okay. I've got a question without notice for you, Olivia. Today you've played in a final, and would you be able to hazard a guess, tell us how far you've run today?
I had a GPS actually, so if I had synced it up before this, I could have told you. And due to the nature of the result, which we're not going to go into, I did attack towards the end. So I would like to say I was edging my way to a fair few Ks, but usually on average I'll hit like 10-ish, yeah.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, usually around that, and perhaps sort of 700 meters sprint kind of distance. And trying to get to like 110, yeah. Yeah, and that's not where I've played. It's really sporadic if you get a GPS or not. I get that because I work with someone private.
Okay.
So like that wouldn't be a team thing, but in other teams I have. But again, we work with software that and hardware that's not accurate. So I know in a team before I've worn team GPSs and clocked 35 Ks an hour, which I can tell you as fast as Erling Haaland. So I don't think I was hitting but I'll take it.
Sure.
Yeah. I know they did this year in the World Cup. Actually, I used to do some bit of work on this as well, but in the ball, they put the tracker in.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, so they've been testing that a while now. So that was quite interesting because that clocked the ball speed, and Chloe Kelly obviously broke the record for the fastest like ball hit. So she broke even English Premier League, didn't hit the ball as hard or as fast as her. I think she got like 110 kilometers per hour in her penalty.
Seriously, that is just outrageous, isn't that?
Yeah, so
that is so good.
Yeah. I know in the games in the stadiums they had a few things pop up. So doing a bit more of like maybe interceptions, headers won, pass completion, things like that. So like Paul said, it is growing, but it's probably still in its infancy. And this is again perhaps from this World Cup, one of the first tournaments, and especially in women's sport, we've seen those stats start to come out. And I'm a bit of a nerd in that. Like I'm quite a keen self-tracker, as well as kind of interested in that stuff. But it should grow like everything else, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, we're going to switch and talk about some of the other big codes shortly as we begin to come to sadly to the end of our time today. But Olivia, what do you think, or what can you tell us about what Australia will do in the next 4 years in the lead up to the next World Cup? What will they do? You think they're going to keep the same coach? What will happen with the team? How do they keep a cohesive unit? What's that all? How does that all work?
Yeah, good question actually. I know obviously some of the girls are kind of on that age where perhaps they're not going to make the next World Cup. Obviously 4 years is quite a long cycle. But I think the talent coming through is incredible. Like, again, I mentioned Mary Fowler again, super young. And a lot of these players are playing in Europe and overseas, especially in the WSL. So I think we'll probably see perhaps a lot more of that. Some of the girls migrating, but obviously Courtney Vine has just re-signed for Sydney FC. So you would hope the investment would come down into the Women's A-League. And so then you could have more players developing in Australia as opposed to having to go overseas. And that probably, again, does come down to a little bit of trying to filter into the leagues below. So across the states, investing in the WNPLs. So each state has a national Premier League itself. So trying to develop into that so then you can bring in the talent into the A-League. because if not, you're probably going to see a lot more players playing overseas and in Europe, and then coming back to play in the World Cup. Yeah.
Did either of you guys happen to see during the week? It was a social media post that came out going through all the Matildas and where they play, and it was really interesting for me that that doesn't know a lot about where the players play in Europe. It was really cool, Ben. So you could see, and these two players, they play at the same club, and that's like some of the other players that they played against. Obviously, that's why they've got such these close relationships and like commiserating each other on the field.
Yes, you did notice that a lot, actually. Yeah,
but it was really good to see where they play, because I'm not aware of that, and I guess a lot of other people wouldn't be either.
Yeah, I think there's only 2 out of the Matilda squad that actually play in the A League. So yeah, definitely kind of there's been a huge migration of those girls, and I think again that comes down to perhaps the investment. The investment has been a bit ahead of time in Europe and in England, so you get offers over there, and then perhaps that is why now the Matildas have again grown themselves and looking, their rankings increase because there's most of them are now playing full time. So again, get the investment, play full time, get the results. But
But that's just recent. So I was doing some research for something I was writing, and I went to an A-League game in Canberra, Melbourne United, in the 24th of November 2019, and at that game there was 1,000 people there, and Ali Carpenter, Emily Van Egmont, Kaya Simons, Steph Catley, there was 2 others. There were 2 other Matildas that were in the squad, so it was 6 Matildas that were playing at that game. So it was just around that, just after the last World Cup, that the investment came in Europe, especially in the English women's league, and then they've moved now. So it is still relatively new.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? It'll be interesting to see what happens leading up to the next World Cup, because we won't have that group like that again, but they've set the benchmark. So it will be really good to see how it goes on. Switching codes just for a moment, we have to mention that AFLW kicks off on September 1. And I know I'll be following the Saints, but also have a bit of a soft spot for my next door neighbour who's an AFL Freo coach. So be watching them as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool.
So
I think you're going to say the Crows.
Lisa Webb, she is the AFL coach for Freo Dockers.
Cool.
But I did read in the last week that there's equal pay for AFLW prize money, and so it's doubled ahead for this upcoming season. Guys, what do you reckon about that?
Huge.
Okay, I'm going to be a bit of a negative Nancy sports sociologist here. So they've given the AFLW the same prize money, but they're splitting it amongst 8 teams, where for the men they're splitting it amongst 4 teams. So it's not the same prize money. So the team that wins the flag for the men's and the women's aren't getting the same money. So this is a bit of a thing, a bit of a trend of like what sports organisations do. So FIFA raised the prize money for the Women's World Cup prize by like 300% or something like that. But it's like if you are getting paid a little bit of money and I double how much money you're getting, you're still getting a little bit of money. So the women's went from like 30 million to like 150 million, where the men's is like 450 million. And if you actually track the percentage of the rise for the men's and women's World Cups, the men's are going up faster than the women's. So I was really surprised at the narrative that came through, and I
fell for that one.
It really, it needs to be challenged, and it's great that the AFL's seen that. I think that it's very much if the FIFA Women's World Cup had not happened, I don't think it would have happened. So I was a bit opportunist, but it's great that it's happened. And it's obviously clear that, all those teams do need the investment, but why didn't they say, well, we'll give the bottom 4 teams this much money, plus we'll give the same as the men and the women's? Because at the moment, we still haven't got a collective bargaining agreement signed for the AFLW players, and the AFLW players want 2% of the revenue from football, and the AFLM players are saying no. So there's still like $1 million isn't much when you're talking about $700 million a year on television rights, sort of thing. So, but it's good to see that maybe it's the groundswell of public pressure on the support of Women's World Cup that brings the AFL to making that. So, don't get me wrong, it's always good to have more investment, but I just think we need to call out these not quite true statements.
Bit of smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
Never mind. Yes, but it is good timing, I guess, in a way, because now that the AFLW is kicking off, on the back of what we've just seen with the Matildas, hopefully gets a lot more people watching as well.
I think it's going to be an exciting season because the last 2 seasons were so condensed that we have a full preseason now, and I think that people are going to be really quite taken by it when it comes back, because there was a bit of saturation there with two seasons in one last year.
Yeah,
absolutely. And amongst all of this activity, I mean, it's just been since the Tour de France. It's just I think I've been sleep deprived since about June. It's been pretty crazy. But in amongst all of that, Australia became world champs in netball as well. So that just quietly sort of slipped into to the news amongst all of this. So that's another pretty amazing achievement for Australian women's sport.
Yeah. Who do we beat in the final, Liv?
Yes, yeah. Well, I'll take it because that was the Roses' best finish as well. So I've got a close friend that works within the team, and that was so exciting because I remember we had the Netball World Cup in Liverpool, the last one, and I went to that, and again the Roses coming through, and then now they made the final, but it's always going to be the Aussies in the world at least. I'll take the soccer.
Yeah. Well, as we come to the end of this awesome chat today, Ben and I really want to thank you guys for taking the time to chat to us about women in sport, and particularly the World Cup. We've actually got sheets and sheets of questions here, but we got to stop somewhere. Part 2. So thank you so much for this awesome conversation. And if anybody wants to continue chatting to us about it, we can answer questions online. But thank you, Paul, and thank you, Olivia, for joining us on Two Cousins, One Chat.
Thanks, my pleasure. Guys. Had a ball. Thank you.
Well, that was a fantastic chat, Kristy. I learned a lot. I've learned a lot, actually. I think I might have to be a bit of a soccer fan and get to some Adelaide United games and get into it. Absolutely. Why not? Let's go and do it.
You could be Olivia's #1 fan club, Ben. Yeah. You and Reed, the whole family, get down there.
That's it.
Exactly. So
fantastic. Why not?
I really loved our chat today, and our earlier chats that we've had on women in sport have just, ranked really high. We've had heaps and heaps and hundreds of downloads. So people love it. People want to hear about it. So you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Linktree. We've got all the social media sites covered there, Ben.
Totally.
Ben, and if you're listening via Spotify, please feel free to comment or rate the pod. It makes it easier for other people to find us, and just really good to know that people are listening. It's not just mum.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can always and my mum too. You can always catch up on our previous episodes. They're all there. So when we catch up again, now you've had an amazing, incredible holiday away to WA. So our next episode, we're going to talk a little bit about your holiday, but we might also talk about some of our not so great holiday experiences. So that's going to be our next episode.
I've got so much to talk to you about, and we might need to record a vault on, which is our special videos that Ben and I record, but we might have to do some of that because I have got 300 photos to share, a million stories, all the fast food that we ate at roadhouses. Oh my God, I've already started. Got to stop. All right.
That's the next episode. Okay, we've got to go for now.
All right. Thanks, Ben. Great to see you. Thanks you so much for listening. See you later.
See you next time.